Hello, I'm Mr. Polk, and welcome to my kitchen. Welcome to the second part of the two-part segment of breakfast items. Today we're going to focus on making a breakfast pastry. It's going to be a homemade version of like a Pop-Tart, something like that. It's something that you're going to be able to bake and you're going to be able to eat and enjoy. And just like the other ones, it's super customizable. The base of it is pie dough. Now you could use store-bought pie dough if you wanted to, but I'm going to show you how to make homemade pie dough. So we're going to start with the bowl of the KitchenAid mixer. And we're going to take 10 ounces of, I prefer pastry flour, but if you don't have pastry flour, AP flour is fine. And then you're going to put the salt in. And once that goes in, we're just going to put it in the mixer and give it a chance to mix around. Now, you could mix this part by hand if you wanted to, but we have the mixer here, we might as well use it. So all I'm looking at is just letting it go around, just to make sure that the salt goes with the flour. Okay? Then, what we need to do is cut in the fats, okay? And for pie dough, I like to use two different fats. I like to use butter because it gives you, obviously, that buttery flavor. And the butter should be super cold. Okay, it just came out of the fridge. And I also like to use vegetable shortening. And the reason I like the vegetable shortening is a neutral flavor, so it doesn't give you that butter flavor. But what it does do is it allows for the flakiness. Okay, so I'm going to turn this on. And what you're going to do is, I just have it on stir or two, and all you want it to do is go around, and it's going to do what's called cutting in the fat. Alright, it's going to take the flour and rub it in between the fat, kind of like we did on the earlier segment where we made the crumb coating. Alright, now I'm going to stop it because I've noticed that all of the Crisco is living on the front there. So I want to kind of shake it up. And you want to do this to what we like to say pea-sized chunks of butter. Meaning that these little chunks of butter in there, so that when we roll the dough out, it's going to make these layers of butter and make our final pastry super flaky. So we just have to let this zip around, alright, until it looks like the size of peas. And you don't want it to go real fast because it's cutting it in. Now, we want to keep that butter in chunks, so we don't want it to melt. So when we put the liquid, the water, we always use ice cold water. So I just have ice and water, I mix it together, and the recipe calls for 2 to 3 ounces. And with pastry, it's hard to say exactly how much water it's going to use. So I'm going to measure out, I got 1 ounce, 2, and 3 ounces of water. Okay? And we want to make a nice softer dough. We don't really want to make a dough that's too brittle that we can't work. Alright, I'm going to step this on too just to get it going. That's looking really good. So, what I will do is take it out for you for a second so you can see what I'm talking about. And what I'm talking about is what's left in here is there's just some small pea-sized chunks of the butter that are going to stay like that. And when you roll the dough out, they're just going to become layers in the dough. And they're going to add to the flakiness. Now, when we mix this, we're going to turn it back on, put it on stir, and we're going to pour in the water. And I'm going to pour in about half of it, and it's going to start to go around. And if you had to do this by hand, you could. You're going to hear it kind of whine a little bit, and then I'm going to pour in a little bit more. I'm just going to let it go. And then, based on how it's looking, I'm just going to put it all in. And at that point, you're going to see it start to come around. And we don't want to overmix it. So what I like to say, when the mixer starts to go, you know you're almost there. So if you listen, it's like, it like moans a little bit, it goes around. And once it gets to that point, I'm pretty good. I'm going to shut her down. We don't need to turn it into a full ball of dough at this point. Okay? Because when you take this off, you're going to see that there's some dough here that's dry and some dough that's kind of on the wet side. So we're going to use a combination of that. So what I'm going to do here is just in the pan, in the bowl, is just mix it all around. And when I do that, now it actually turns into something. So if you see this, I'll get rid of the bowl so you can see it. And this is what the pie dough is going to look like. It's got some softness to it. Alright, it's not brittle, it's not falling apart. And it's got chunks of butter in it. It should have chunks of butter. Okay? So what I want to do is just kind of cut that in half, because this is enough to make the bottoms of our pastry. All right, and then this guy is enough to make the tops. Now, one of the things I like to do is I like to make it more like a disc, okay? So that when I roll it out, it's ready to go. So what I want to do with this is I would like to grab some saran wrap, and I'm just going to wrap these up, and then they're going to go in the fridge. Wrap this guy. You want your dough to rest. You wouldn't want to start, because the dough, remember we use the cold water and everything? We wouldn't want to start working this dough right away. If we start to work this dough now, what's going to happen is it's going to just start to get too soft for us. So this dough would then go into the refrigerator and rest. Okay, put that over there. And now, let's take a look at dough that is finished. So this is dough that has rested and has taken its nap. It's time to wake it up. Hello! And you're going to see that it's the same thing, except it's a little tighter together. All right, and it looks really good. And now we're going to prepare to roll this out. Okay, so when you roll the dough out, you're going to want to use your rolling pin. And you're going to need, I want to put it down there, it'll roll away on me. You're going to need some flour. Always use the flour that you made your dough with, and always put it in a small bowl. People like to just, I like to say, grab out of the big bag of flour. The problem is you have raw product on your hands here. You put it in the flour, you get chunks of dough that are going to go bad in your flour. So whatever I grub with my hands, that would then get thrown away. So you want to just do it on a smooth surface. I happen to have a wooden board. Sprinkle some flour down. Sill pats work great. You want to get a good bit of flour down on the bottom, and then put your ball of dough on top. Notice that's why I did it as a disc, so it's already half flat. Do a little sprinkle, and then take your rolling pin, and I want to roll front and back, turn it, and roll front and back again. And all I'm doing is making it into this like flatter disc. And the edges start to break apart, and that's all right. So I just push them back together. So get back in there. And then I flip it over, because when I did all that flour that was on the bottom gets worked into the dough. So I flip it over, put a little bit more flour on the bottom, and then I reevaluate how I look here. You don't want to use too much flour, because that can dry out your dough, but you don't want it to stick at the same point. So you do one of these just to make sure it's not going to stick, and then a little bit on there, and then we start going back and forth. All right, we're looking for a section of dough that's about 1/8 of an inch thick. If you pick up little guys on your rolling pin, I always clean them off. About 1/8 of an inch thick, and we want to be about 12 inches by 8 inches. Okay, so that's looking good that way. One of the things is you can't be afraid of your dough. It's okay to pick it up and move it around a little bit. And we're going to try and start getting 8 inches this way. So we're going back and forth, just kind of rolling it out. It's nice and thin. I'm going to put this guy over here. I feel like I'm going to hit it. There we go. Now I can work a little bit. Alright, it's looking nice and smooth. We'll go this way with it. Now, that edge kind of broke out on me a little bit. That's okay. We just push them back together. And then we get out our ruler and we start to see where we are. Now the good thing is, with the size dough I have, if you get it to where it's supposed to be roughly 9 by 12, it's going to have to be 1/8 of an inch thick. And again, it's hard when I'm doing this and I'm talking and focusing, so if I get little tears, you just push them back together. And then what you want to use is you want to take your pastry wheel, okay, or as you might say, wait a minute, that's a pizza cutter, whatever it is you want to call it. And we want to make a cut here. And we want to make this 9 by 12, or 8 by 12. So get rid of that. We're going to come over here and make a nice straight edge. And we're going to look for 8 inches and make a mark. We'll come down here, make a mark. Then we'll cut through. And right here is the edge of our 12. And there we have our base. Now, once we have our base, what we're going to do is cut that into rectangles. Now this would be enough to make 8 pastries, and then you do it again and make the lids. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make 4 bottoms and 4 tops, so I don't have to roll this out again. So take my ruler, and again I like to use a ruler for baking. This is a stainless steel one. I can wash it, sanitize it. And you want to cut, the recipe will tell you, 3-inch strips. Because we want to make these little guys 3 by 4. So we go 3-inch strips, and then we cut this in half at the 4 inches, and now we've got 3 by 4 inch strips. Alright? Now, next step, we don't need this anymore, is to actually start to build them. I'm just going to put this behind me. So we're going to take our tray. This is just a sheet tray, and it's got parchment paper on it. And where'd it go? Oh, I didn't want me. We're going to go underneath your dough because you want it relaxed. And if you were doing all 8 of these, you could lay them this way. 1, 2, and then 2 by 4. But I'm just going to put 4 of them on. Right. I'm going to do this one, this one. And then now, you're going to fill them up. So let's move these over here so that I can bring the tray over. Look at that. Okay, looks good. Now, you're going to fill these up. And you're going to fill them up with different fillings. One is you can pick any jelly you want. So for this one I did strawberry jelly today. And it's about 2 tablespoons full or so. You want to put the jelly in the middle. That's probably more jelly than you would want. But we'll just keep them filled up. But don't go to the edge. Give it a good 3/8 to a 1/2 inch. Okay, and then put your jelly over here. Same thing. Because you're going to have to put a lid on these. Alright. It was definitely a generous amount of jelly in the first one, so we'll make sure we make it look the same on this guy. Don't want him to get mad. And then what you're going to do is, some of them, a lot of people like the brown sugar. So in the recipe I have a mixture of, you can mix brown sugar and a little bit of flour, okay, and some cinnamon, and it makes this cinnamon brown sugar. I know it looks funny because it's a powder right now, and it is, but when it cooks out, when it goes in the oven, it's going to turn into a liquid, and it gives you that nice filling that you're used to in a pastry like that. So I'm going to make a nice mound in the middle on that one so we're not shy. I always believe if you're going to put the ingredients in, you put them in. So that looks nice and puffy. It says a little bit more. Okay, now we're going to build them. So what we're going to do is use the glue of the pastry world, which is an egg wash. This is just 2 eggs with 2 tablespoons of cold water. And what we're going to do is take our brush, and we're just going to brush the edges, alright, because this is where they seal together. So I do this step. Now if you had to do this and then roll out your tops, I would wait to do this till your tops are ready, because you don't want this to dry on you, because you want this to be wet. It's okay that I'm getting it on the parchment because that's just going to bake off. No one's going to see that. But you don't want to skimp on this. This is important because this is what keeps it together. If they open up, all your goodies are going to come out, especially these that we kind of overfilled a little bit. Okay? That one there is looking a little big. I am going to take just a little out of that guy. Just because I'm afraid that when I squeeze it, all I'm going to do is push everything out. Then we'll take our tops and put them on. And you want to like work it on the edges, just like that, especially if you're worried about it squeezing out, and press. Okay. The cinnamon sugar. Another cinnamon sugar. And then what you're going to do is you're going to seal them. I won't seal all of them because you don't need to see me seal them all, but I do want to show you how you seal them. And that is, you're going to use your fork, and I just go all the way around. So I just don't push in too hard. If you push in too much, you actually cut them. Now, I'll just do them here. One of the things is I do kind of used to production, so I just kind of do, it's easy to do all one side. So I do the one side of all of them, and then I just turn my sheet tray and just keep going. And this way, you're not like reaching all kind of odd, otherwise you're like going all the way around. This way it makes it easier on you, and it's more of a production piece. And then the last thing you have to do is, anytime you bake something like this, the fillings are going to cook. And when they cook, they're going to give off steam. And if they give off steam, what they're going to do is cause the pastry to puff up too much. So what we want to do is let some of that steam vent out. So to do that, we're going to cut some, or poke some holes in them. Okay, so that looks good. We're going to take a toothpick. Let me get one out of here. And you can use a fork, but I think that puts too many holes in it. I just use the toothpick and go around, and this is going to let the steam escape when they bake. And then the last thing before they go in the oven, they're going to go in a 375 degree oven for 18 to 20 minutes or so, depends on your oven, is you want these to shine. So egg wash not only glues it, but the proteins will give it a real nice shine when they bake. So I brush the whole thing generously with the egg wash before they go in the oven. Okay. Brush that guy, and then this one. Now, so we're going to go ahead and put those guys over here in the oven. And when they come out of the oven, what we're going to have to do is ice them. So for that, we're going to make a classic, excuse me, we're going to make a classic powdered sugar glaze. For the powdered sugar glaze, we're going to start with powdered sugar, and then we're going to add a little bit of corn syrup, which is going to make it shine when it dries, because we want it to dry hard like the pastries do. And then we'll give it some flavoring. So, we got vanilla, we have the corn syrup, and then we have some of the milk. Now, the tricky part is not to add too much milk, or you're going to make this too thin. So we're going to take corn syrup, just like that.
Is that okay? Is that okay that you...
Yeah. So we're going to take the corn syrup and put it in. That there. And we're going to put in the vanilla. And then we're going to put in, it calls for 1 to 2 tablespoons of milk. So I'm going to do about a tablespoon. And here's where it gets tricky. When you first start, it's going to just fill up inside the whisk. Okay. Alright, so you see how the inside is starting to get thicker? So I'm going to add some more. Okay. And now, I added a lot of milk that time, so this is where I'm going to have to be careful, and that I'm going to start stirring it. And what's happening is it looks like it's really dry, but it is going to start to blend in. I know, I'm getting powdered sugar everywhere. Now, you see what happens here? You see all this in the middle? That sticks in there, but that's the powdered sugar that's wetter. See how super wet that is? So I'm going to go ahead and add half of what I have left. Alright. And start to bring it around. Now, this is where you're going to see that it's starting to look more like an icing. But see how it's like stiff here? Inside there, it's all wet. So what we want to do is sort of get that to come out. So give it a little hit. Because the reason I'm doing it slow like this, if all I did was start adding milk upon milk upon milk, you're going to get an icing that is just not going to, it's going to be too wet. Alright? So I'm going to add maybe half of what I have left. There we go. Okay, and then let's put in the rest of it there. Now you're starting to get something. Okay. Now this one ended up getting a little thick on me. A lot of times you put that much milk in, they thin out, but you never know. So I'm going to add just a touch of water just to give it a little bit. But again, you got to be real careful now, because now it's at the point where if you add too much, it's going to get too thin. And then when it gets too thin, then you have to just add more powdered sugar. And then once you add more powdered sugar, then it's too thick. So you see what's happening here? This is what I'm trying to explain. Is when it gets to this point, it looks thick, and then it starts to like flow on you. Okay? So we're going to go just a little bit more. And I'm being cautious because I want it to stay thick. If I just would have dumped it all in, it would have got thin right off the bat. But that's not what we want. Alright, this is looking pretty good. So I want you to see that the icing is something that I'll be able to put on. It's going to flow. Alright? But it's not going to flow off the product. If it flows off the product, then it's going to be too soft. Alright? Let me add just a touch more. And now we're ready to go. So let's see how they turned out. I'll set that over there. Okay. So here's ones that just came out of the oven. Look at these guys. Alright, these look great. They got beautiful color to them. Alright, they're ready to get the icing. Now you see that, how it looks thick, but as soon as it sits, it like flows. Okay? And that's why we call this flow icing. What we're going to use is just a spoon. Okay. And you can use a spatula if we need it. And you just want to, I wouldn't even pipe it. I just like to spoon it on. And you can add different colors if you want. And you just want to bring it around, because again, if I would let it get too thin, it would just start to flow right off of it. Because you're going to notice that after I ice this, the icing's going to start to flow. Okay. That looks great. Put some on this guy. Okay, right on the top. And then if you want, you can spread it. See what happened there? Just from sitting like that, it starts to like spread out. And if you made, like I said, if you made it too thin, it's just going to run all over the place. Okay, so we spread this guy out. I'll go to another one. I'll do two more, and I think we look good. See how that one did a lot on there? It's starting to come on the edges. There we go. And you could make this different colors. So if you wanted different colors on here, if you wanted to put pink on the strawberry, or if you even wanted to add a little bit of cinnamon to the ones that are getting the cinnamon, you could do that and make it fun. However you wanted to do it, you could do a lot of different things. Okay, or you could put sprinkles on, or you could drizzle chocolate, or if you made ones with chocolate inside, you could drizzle chocolate on top. So you could get real creative. And the idea here, let me get rid of this, is if you wanted to, you could throw some sprinkles on. See, look at that. And there you have your breakfast pastry / homemade Pop-Tart. And this is something that you can enjoy. And not only can you enjoy it, but it's made with fresh ingredients that you made. You made the homemade dough, you washed it, I'll put the egg wash on, you got the glaze to it. And then this type of icing, it's called flow icing, so it'll get hard. If you let these, once they're cool, if you let them sit, and this is the other thing, you don't want to ice them until they're cool, because the icing will just melt. When you let it sit, the icing will start to harden. It starts to like glaze over from the corn syrup. And you'd be able to stack these and have a nice little tray full of these. So there you have the second segment of the breakfast cooking, where we took a look at making a really nice homemade breakfast pastry. So once again, I thank you for cooking with me today. I look forward to cooking with you again, and right here in Mr. Pope's Kitchen.